Welcome to the Kansas City Business Cast, where we assemble a cast of small business owners and entrepreneurs here in the Kansas City Metro. The goal of this show is to have folks come on, tell you about how they got their start, how they do what they do, and what they're doing to get where they're going. Hate to be that guy, but I'm going to ask you, please remember to follow, click the little subscription bell, and if you like what you hear today, would you kindly leave us a review? Very much appreciated. Full disclosure, my guest today is Joey Williams from Populus Recruiting. I know this guy, have a lot of very positive working experiences with him, and when he started his own agency, I thought this is one of the people that I want people to know here in the city. Without further ado, Joey Williams, welcome to the Kansas City Business Cast, sir.
Thanks, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, sir. So you were actually one of the handful of people I thought of when I was thinking through, if I started a podcast, what would it be about? One of the reasons for that is every conversation we have, whether it's over coffee or it's on the phone or through Slack channels now, text messages, I walk away so many times going, I wish everyone would have gotten to hear that wisdom nugget. Everyone would have gotten to hear that encouragement or that reflection or insight. I think you and I are both really good at verbally processing things. So I couldn't think of a better person to have on the show today. So thank you again, sir. It's an honor.
Yeah. Verbal processor is something I don't think anyone has ever called me in my entire life. So I don't know. Yeah, I appreciate it, man. It's an honor. This is podcast number 2 I've ever been on. So we'll see how it goes.
That's right. So I think it's important for everyone to know about what you do now. Tell us about Populus, what you do, how you started it. We'll kind of go down every rabbit hole we need to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would probably call myself a reluctant entrepreneur. My father-in-law is a very successful businessman here in Kansas City. My wife has owned businesses. She's sold businesses, all while I had a 9-to-5. And it was all based on wanting to be stable, right? It was a stability thing for me. I was never going to walk away from a paycheck, to be honest with you. And so when I got the opportunity to start, I just thought, hey, the best thing to do would be what I know and what I'm good at, which is recruiting. So Populus is born, honestly, out of the name alone. You can see Populus is Latin for people, and I get a lot of, there's a big architecture firm here in town that Populus is spelled the wrong way, which means like group. That's not what I'm about, actually. It's kind of funny, the dichotomy there, the contrast there is like, I'm not about groups, right? I'm not about dumping people into a hiring manager's lap and just saying, here you go, pick. I'm about the people who they're going to be engaging with and hiring and stuff. So Populus, in so much as it's a recruiting firm, right? But to me, it's more than that, because I spent a decade inside of companies as a recruiter, and I engaged with so many bad agencies, right? The guys who are like, yeah, I can do everything. And then they just feed you just lines and lines of junk. To answer your original question, Populus is a recruiting agency. We do the traditional model, which is the 20% fee or the 25% fee. But then we do something a little bit different in that we do flat fee recruiting, which what that is it is, hey, your company pays us a flat fee every month, and we'll recruit as many people as you want and any kind of person as you want. And what I've found is that model frees up the hiring managers to think a lot more clearly about the people they're hiring and not the money they're spending on those people, right? So the $100,000 applicant on a traditional model is actually $120,000 hire, right? And that does play into people's thinking when they hire folks. So, I want to take that out. I want the hiring managers to only think about the candidate, the quality of the candidate, how they're going to work within the business, and if they're a quality hire. So having a flat fee, it is, hey, I've paid this flat fee and I'm going to hire these people based on who's the best fit, the best candidate, without thought of money or anything like that. The freedom to have multiple different jobs going at any one time too, it builds trust and it builds partnership with the business as well. So it's something that I've never seen in the recruiting world. And again, I've been in it a long time and dealt with a lot of agencies. And so it's something that's really resonating with people. And I think that it's just better all the way around. I'm not pushing to get someone hired because I want that 20%, and they're not hesitant to hire the person because they don't want to pay it, so.
Right. Well, lots to unpack there. I really appreciate you telling the world about your services too, because this is something that I've been really inspired by watching you build that. If we start from your origin story from Populus Recruiting, right? So obviously there's a lot of history there in recruiting, lots of lessons learned. I know that you've launched plenty of, proprietary recruiting programs in the agencies that you've worked with, or companies rather, because you started an agency, but you're not even a year old. How old is Populus at this point? And maybe you could talk about the start of Populus.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, like I said, reluctant entrepreneurship, I think, is a legitimate thing. And I think a lot of times I still feel that way a little bit. So we're not even a year old. Populus is not even a year old. So we started back in December of 2020. Two? Yep. What year is it? And it was born out of the fact that I was working in tech for a Silicon Valley tech company, and I got laid off. Like that's really where it was. And as I was sitting there, feverishly applying for jobs, I thought to myself, and it was actually my wife, and I'll give my wife credit for this, is she came downstairs and I'm just hammering away on job applications, and she just is like, hey, I have an idea. Like, why don't you do your own thing for once? And it was kind of like, I never had even thought of it. And I was like, well, how could I do that? And she's like, it's really not difficult. My wife is a web designer. She's a graphic designer. And she's like, I could have you a website in an hour. And I was like, are you sure? And that's the thing. That's the thing that I think always stopped me from doing it, is the fact that my first responsibility as a man is to support and take care of my family. That is bar none. It's not to follow my dreams. It's not to find fulfillment anywhere outside of my family. It is you support your family at any means necessary. And I've told my wife Haley this before. I said, I will literally shovel manure before I don't have a job. Like, and that is the truth. And funny story in that is that when we were first married, I did have to shovel manure for a time. I was on a landscaping crew to pay the bills. And so it's not hot air by any means, but it was hey, are you sure? And her response was, yeah, absolutely. Like, you can do it. And so it was like, all right, here we go. And so that was really the main thing. That's the origin of it, was really, I'll give the credit to my wife in that. And so, started on the traditional path, and then kind of found that up and down, ridiculous feast or famine mindset,
traditional path for staffing companies.
Yeah, wasn't what I liked, right? I like to know what's coming in and what's going out, and know that we're gonna have money coming into the business, right? And we can plan to hire people if we know what this amount of money is coming in. We can hire someone to help grow the business, and then I had a couple traditional customers that I really became good friends with, that I trusted, that I was like, hey, I have this idea. Like, would you as a business be interested in this? And their answer was, yeah, if we needed it, right? If we had more than one person to hire, absolutely.
To pause real quick, traditional, when you say that, you mean like for position, direct hire, right? Like headhunter style.
Yeah.
Like
So traditional, when you tell a business owner you're a recruiter and you own a recruiting agency, they immediately roll their eyes and they just go, "Oh, the fees. Oh, the fees. Why should I have to pay you, 30% to just find someone? Like, oh, I could do that by myself." And then you say, "Well, why haven't you?" Right? You can.
Right.
So yeah, that's the traditional model. We'll call that traditional.
There we go. Yep.
And so in kind of thinking about what was important to me as a business owner, I came up with this idea, right? And like the light bulb went off and stuff like that. And so went out and got an awesome customer through relationships that I have, and we're not even half a year into that contract, and it's going awesome, and it's kind of and now we can scale, right? And that's the thing that I think I've always had a problem thinking about as a traditional agency, is how do you scale? How do you find more customers? How is it scalable? How do you hire someone? Because that's another goal of mine, is give people meaningful jobs to work for me. you and I have had we've shared a lot of the same awful managers, you and me, which is funny. But I don't want to do that, right? I want to change the way that happens. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So it was supportive family, trust in the Lord, understanding that even if it fails, at least I tried too. I think that that's a big thing, is even if it doesn't work, it's like 99.99999% of people don't even try. And that's so right. I would much rather try and fail than not try at all.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that, there's probably more recruiters out there than we would think that are thinking the same sort of philosophy and mindset right now. I remember when I first engaged with agency recruiters, it was when I was working for a company in California. And I always wondered why, the organization would want to hire a headhunter or an agency. And then I actually worked for an agency for a while, for about 13 months out in California. And I remember what that was like, and getting my eyes open to, these direct hire fees. And those were always like the golden, nugget, basically. Like, go after those direct hire fees. You mentioned earlier 30%. To the people who don't know, that's 30% of the person's annual salary.
One time.
Yeah, it's a one-time fee. Yep. They pay you to find that person. And then there's usually some sort of guarantee baked in there. Like if they don't work out in the first, 60 days or whatever it is. And so I love how, you socialize this idea, the proof of concept, right? Like, hey, I've got this idea. What if you just hire me to take over your talent acquisition, right? Which is basically what you're doing with one of your clients right now. But for the recruiters out there, I think right now it's a pretty scary time in the job market. I mean, here in Kansas City, we've seen literally thousands of layoffs in this city alone. What is your word of advice, I guess, to the recruiters that are, working in this industry right now, getting the throngs of unemployed folks attacking, their inboxes and applying for jobs? What would you say to those people?
The people who want to start, the people who are unemployed or employed?
Employed, like recruiters.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think,
go to them.
Yeah, no, my best advice is, and this is the thing that I always, when I managed recruiters, I always used to tell them, is like, these are people, like, even, and I joke about crapplicant, and it's just a colloquialism, right? Like, we care deeply about people, but engaging, the recruiter who engages with people has a responsibility to treat them like people. And I understand more than most, that how overwhelmed they are. Talent acquisition is usually the most understaffed. They're the people that when things are going well, no one cares about them. When things are going wrong, everybody hates them, right? Or it's always their fault. And that's simply not true. That's an indication of a bad organization. But I think that would be my charge to employed talent acquisition people who are really like not only happy to have jobs, right, but also being reached out to by people who are asking for help is one, they're people, treat them like people, treat them with respect. And my biggest thing is communicate with the folks that you have on your plate. And if it's not going to work, be honest with them. And if you don't have anything, just be honest, hey, I don't have anything right now, or here's what you need to do, or connect with this person. And I would also say there's a ton of noise out there for recruiters. A lot of these so-called expert recruiters haven't recruited a day in their life. So be careful to who you listen to. Kind of check the background of folks who supposedly are experts. And, I think that's all you can do, right?
Absolutely. To kind of pivot a little bit, talking about folks that are unemployed, what are some things that you look out for when somebody's making a job transition and they're applying for one of your jobs? Yeah,
I think that it's important to have a strong resume. Obviously, I think cover letters are outdated. People ask for help on cover letter, because we do some resume services and stuff, and we don't even offer cover letter stuff just because it's not worth our time, to be honest. And anytime I got a job application when I was internal with a cover letter, I just skipped past it,
Right.
And I tell people a lot of times, I say, have an updated resume, make sure, go out and look at new resume templates because they do change, right? The layouts change and stuff. Make sure you have a LinkedIn. I know how crazy it is to think people still think LinkedIn is a fad. It's like, it's not. Like, it's not a fad at all. My business runs on LinkedIn, right? So, and then I would say too, don't get discouraged. Make it your full-time job. Don't get discouraged. And there's really no quick fix to finding a new role. And decide if you want to be a recruiter anymore, right? Like if you're a recruiter and you got laid off and decide if you want to do it anymore, because it's not for everybody. There are days where I don't want to do it anymore. And I've been doing it about a decade, right? And then you take a little break and get back to it. But and for the job hunter that's not a recruiter, I would say use your connections to help you get your foot in the door, right? People who know people are the way you get jobs 99% of the time, because the amount of applications that a recruiter looks at just off the street is nuts, right? Like I remember times where I'd post a job and 12 hours later I'd have 300 applications, right? And then I, as the internal recruiter, have to comb through all of those. And it's like, man, after you get through 50 and you're like, man, I can't do this anymore. These will stay here. Those 50, I'll review those, Right. So, but if someone knew someone inside the organization and said, hey, this person applied, can you look out for it? I would go through those 300. I would search through and I would find that one and make sure that I reviewed that one. So
absolutely. Yeah. I really appreciate you mentioning the resume templates, being mindful about, ditching the cover letter. We know that just adds a bunch of characters to the resume. And you and I have both done applicant tracking system implementations. And we know that the way these resumes are ranked, it's almost like the more words and the less of a match, I guess, the strength of the content of the resume is a match for the job, the higher your chances are of not being seen. So when, you started with Populus, I guess, what were some of the pain points that you've gone through? You've kind of touched on some things, it was like just getting a start and all that. You mentioned, missing out on, I think, some direct hire placements. Yeah. What sort of challenges have you had as you started this business?
Yeah, so the main challenge of any business is revenue, right? And so I think I have missed out on revenue based on the traditional model, right? And so I think that is what kind of brought me into this new flat fee thing, and the way that, and what people don't understand is a lot of these agency recruiters, and myself included, is we don't get paid unless you get a placement. And that's why agency recruiters are so desperate, And that's why they're kind of scumbags a lot of times, right? Because they're desperate, right? They're not getting paid. They're literally working for free until they hire someone. And that happened to me a few times. And that's kind of after missing out on a few placements that could be 6 months worth of living expenses or income, I sit at my desk and say, I don't like to work for free. Right. I don't want to work for free. This sucks. And so that's been the main pain point, I think, is figuring out if the model that I thought would actually work for me and my life and my family and my desires and what's important to me. Right. And so, that's probably the biggest pain point. I mean, additionally, finding customers is always a pain point, but that's something you just learn, and you have to continually be looking for new people to talk to and connect with. And, again, having a super supportive wife who knows really well, since we've been married long enough and I've been doing this long enough, she knows really well what I do. And so anytime she's somewhere and someone asks about us or me, she can kind of not pitch, but kind of, right? And I think the old adage, like always be selling, is something I used to really hate. And now I'm like, well, building relationships and selling kind of go hand in hand. So you have to do it all the time.
Absolutely.
Perfect example. I was at a HOA board meeting last night, which is hilarious that I attended one of those. If you knowing me for so long, you're like, what are you doing there? But just in talking to people, they're asking what I do and just explaining it to them. And then it's like, these are people who are super connected. Who the heck knows when they'll run into someone who says, man, I'm struggling to hire someone. And they're like, oh, I have a neighbor who does, like, here's his number, give him a call. Or, so I think that changing that mindset too, of like, man, I don't want to be a scummy, always selling and it's like, well, no, if the point of you talking about what you do with people is to build a relationship with them, then it's not scummy. It's not dishonest. It's just you. It's the same thing if someone asks you what you do and you're like, yeah, I work for this company or that company. This is it's the exact same thing. The only difference is that it's yours.
Absolutely. So, I'm glad you started talking about networking in a way. I wanted to ask you about, how you network. I can tell you just from my personal experience with starting my business this year, the networking, it's amazing. It can also be very tedious to track, your meetups and who to meet with and, how you determine, where the most beneficial conversations are going to happen as well, because that's an element like not wasting somebody's time,
right,
and actually valuing their time and them valuing yours. How do you network in Kansas City?
Yeah. So, my father-in-law is a member of an organization called Arrived Outdoors, that is, business owners here in town that are more like outdoor focused. They go hunting and fishing and camping and stuff together. And he's been gracious enough to let me tag along with him, which is awesome. And hopefully he'll be on the podcast, because he's got way more. He's forgotten more about business than I've ever known. Right. So I go, they do a monthly thing there that I try to attend. And then I'm just now, and this is something that you've actually I felt the conviction from you, how active you are in the meetups and stuff. It's like, man, I need to do more. So, I mean, like the Olathe Chamber of Commerce has a coffee thing every month that I put them on my calendar. I need to start attending. Every Chamber of Commerce in the city of Kansas, or in the city, all of the cities' Chamber of Commerces have small business meetups.
Right.
It's one of the things that our tax dollars pay for when you do that. So, all of the chambers, I need to start going to those. And admittedly, I'm not super good at networking, to be honest with you. But it's something that I need to grow in, and that's something that I'm learning, is, hey, Cold emails and cold phone calls are great, but it's a lot harder for someone to reject you to your face.
That's right.
So
that takes courage.
Yeah, it takes real courage. That's why you don't see many keyboard warriors out in the wild, right?
That's right. That's right.
So, that's what I would say, and I know that you're a member of a few, and there's a decent amount here in town, right? I think it's not hard to find a meetup or a small business association or something like that. And the thing that I've kind of been learning too is like building connections costs you only time, but if you're not willing to do that, it's going to cost you a lot more, right?
Absolutely.
And I was initially kind of worried about like, I don't want to get too busy. I don't want to have too much going on. And then you're like, man, you're not even close to too busy. Like, let's, and you should be busy. If you're going to be successful and you're going to be a business owner and you're going to make money, you should be busy, So yeah.
I really appreciate your vulnerability in saying I'm not a natural at networking. I have a feeling like a lot of people, I mean, I know me, you would think I'm great at networking because I like talking to people. I mean, gosh, I started a podcast so I could talk to people about business, but I have my moments as well. What's your advice for folks that are not naturally inclined to do this? I mean, what have you done to get yourself out there? And, you talked about the lesson of not being too busy, like really rationalizing how busy you are or not. But what are some things that you've done or arrived at in your mind to get you to do the more of the networking?
Yeah. And I think that, it's definitely, I think my one thing would be find someone to do it with. I think that was a huge thing for me is find someone and the word, I hate the word mentor because I think it gets abused, right? Because I think that there's, I don't like that. And so what I would say is when I was starting out, my father-in-law is someone I look up to in business. He's obviously family. We love each other. But he was willing to bring me along with him and talk to me about, hey, what's going on? How are you feeling? What are you doing? And then also I had to put the work in of saying, well, I'm feeling this way, right? Like it's a two-way street. If he would have come to me and been like, hey, how are you doing? I would have been like, good. And that's it. Then it wouldn't have gone very far. But instead it was, hey, I'm struggling with this. I'm feeling this. I remember sitting with him and he's been in business 35 years. And I'm like, do you ever feel like you don't know what you're doing? I'm sitting across the table from him and he looks at me and he goes, every day. I go, well, what do you do? He's like, get up and keep trying. And it's like, okay. So so my feelings are not normal, right? They are normal feelings to have for an entrepreneur because someone who's super successful and been in business 35 years still has those feelings. So it makes sense. And so when I was starting, he was willing to take me along to things and kind of side by side introduce me to the people he knew, right? It's, hey man, I want you to meet Joey. 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 And then honestly, he would just fade away. And the fact of the matter is that at networking events, what are people there to do? Network. So they expect it, right? Like my big worry was like, oh man, I'm going to be bugging these people and stuff. It's like, no, that's why they're there, right? You go to a small business happy hour. They're there because they all own small businesses and they want to network and they want to grow their businesses too. So everybody's there for the same reason. There's no pretense in, oh, you shouldn't be doing this. It's like, no, that's what they're there for, right?
Yeah.
So that was it. That would be my advice: is find someone to do it with, and even if that's, through I don't know. That's it.
I hear you. And something that you just said that reminded me about what I love about being an entrepreneur. And I'm going to ask you things you love about being an entrepreneur. But I think that a lot of folks that are reluctant out there to start their own business, I don't think they know about how awesome it is to meet other entrepreneurs. And I know in my, my season, which one day we'll talk about that on the show, of unemployment, I met more entrepreneurs in that time than I did willing hiring managers that wanted to offer me jobs. And I think part of that is because entrepreneurs had to go through, a crucible on their own. And if somebody's in front of them that wants this life, they will help them, however they need. Most of the time, entrepreneurs are very willing helpers. And so, kind of pivoting with your setbacks and challenges, let's go to, what are the things you like about being an entrepreneur? Where are your wins? What are your victories so far? Tell us about those.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I love about it is that there's no limit, right? The only limit is myself. And that's what I think a lot of people feel who are like, and I'll air quote, like stuck in the business world, right? Is like, oh, I can only go so far. I can only go so far because this person isn't going to retire, or this person isn't going to quit, or there's not a job open for me, so I have to go to this other place. That's not the case as an entrepreneur. It is, hey, your limit is you, and if you're willing to work hard, if you're willing to connect with people, if you're willing to change and learn and adjust and admit you suck sometimes and fail and learn again and fail again and be humble enough to ask for help. There's no limit to what you can do, right? There's nobody saying, hey, you're only going to go this far because I'm in this seat and you're under me. That doesn't exist. So I love that. I also I have 3 small kids. I love the flexibility that it provides me. I love the fact that I can show my kids that you're responsible for your own actions, and no matter what the circumstances are, you're capable to do something, right? We sat down with our girls, and when I got laid off and we said, hey, this happened, God is still good. The Lord is still in control. We're going to trust that he'll provide for us. But dad still is going to work hard, right? Trusting in the Lord is not hands up, sit back. Okay, God, do your thing. It is, hey, I know who you are and I know your character. It's not it's not if you will provide, it's how you will provide. And so I love that we've been able to walk that out in front of our girls. And we've been able to say, hey, mom and dad are both entrepreneurs. Nobody is giving us anything. And talking to them, and this is something that was put into my wife when she was a kid, watching her dad be an entrepreneur, is, hey, how could you make money? And that was from a very young age. She was always thinking about, hey, what can I do for myself? What can I do for myself? What can I do for myself? So to be able to show my kids, hey, this is a legitimate opportunity, and you can do it for yourself. And to share success with them. I know that I posted a video on LinkedIn months and months ago of like, I think it was my first really big direct placement. And we were hoping for it. We were working through it. We thought it was going to come through, and it finally came through. I went downstairs and I danced in my living room with my kids and celebrated that win with them.
That's on the Populus LinkedIn page.
Yeah,
I think if anyone wants, we'll put your socials
shameless
in
plug,
the show
shameless
notes.
Plug, right? But
everyone's got to see that.
But it's. I never did that. Even through promotions, I've been promoted tens of times in the normal. I never did that. It was, hey, dad got a promotion. Cool. It's just different, right? You get to share wins differently because it's your win. You've built it. You've worked hard for it. So that's probably what I love. I think I probably don't love taxes because a business owner. I think that's probably the thing that I'm like, man, Uncle Sam is a greedy bugger, ain't he? But, I don't know if I could say there's anything that I really don't like about business at this point. I'm still so young in my journey. I'm still figuring it out. I'm sure that things will come. that I'll be like, man, that really sucks. But right now I don't think I have anything. Because it's been a blessing, and like I tell people, I'll never go back if I can help it. Lord willing, I'll never go back.
Right.
Whether it's this business or doing something else, or I don't know.
I love hearing you talk about the legacy that you're building. And I think that's something that I like about being an entrepreneur as well, is the example I'm showing my kids. And, one of the things I'm thinking about right now is the legacy that you're building here in Kansas City. So I don't think it's news to anyone in our circle of past peers, professionals, friends, former managers, acquaintances, that you've gone on this journey. When you announced Populus Recruiting, I mean, that was a stake in the ground. I saw it as, because I just know you and I'm a huge fan of yours personally, and I'm always rooting for you, but when you did that, it helped me understand, whoa, I can do that too. And I know that people are watching what you're doing and cheering you on. And we see that happen on the socials. As much as I complain about the LinkedIn algorithms and how specific they are, that's just another thing I think that I have to dismiss as a business owner, is like, let's focus on the income producing activity and all that. So, going with that in the day-to-day and the things that you do, what personal systems or disciplines do you use to make sure you have a successful business and that you're building? I mean, because that's also a challenge, right?
Yeah. And I think I like being home a lot. So I don't have an office. My office is a desk in my house, right? And so I think the thing that keeps me going is doing meaningful tasks every day, even if that meaningful task is, hey, I'm going to send 10 LinkedIn messages today. Because what that ends up doing is that one meaningful task leads to 2 meaningful tasks, leads to 3 meaningful tasks. And it's kind of like this, it's a, hey, I got that done. Let's move to this. And, I think that there are days where I don't do as much as I should and days where I do more than I should. And I think it just all balances out, right? And I think that I always laugh. There's all these folks, again, these supposed experts, and maybe they have more zeros in their bank account than I do, whatever. That doesn't make you an expert. But they're like, I live 3 days by 6 p.m. because, 1 to, 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. is my first day. And, you've probably seen this, or maybe you haven't. But, and then it's kind of ridiculous. It's like,
when they post their personal,
they
give you a screenshot of all the alarms on their phone. That's another new one that kind of makes me cringe.
Give me a break, right? So maybe you're living it, but I've come to learn that 90% of the stuff on the internet is bullcrap. But I think that systems I put in place. I mean, Airtable is an awesome system. If we're talking just operationally, Airtable is an awesome free Excel on steroids. Slack is great. I'm not telling anybody anything new here, but I think it really is just, doing meaningful work throughout the day in chunks. I think that's how I work best. I'm going to do 30 minutes of this one task, and then I'm going to put that task away, and then I'm going to move over here and I'm going to do 45 minutes of this task, and then I'm going to put that away, and then I'm going to get up and I'm going to go outside and walk, or, do the dishes or whatever, and just kind of, just kind of do what I think I need to do. I think the business is small enough right now. I don't need someone telling me what to do or where to be. And so I know, hey, this customer is important. We need to focus on this customer. This customer is okay right now. We don't need to focus on them right now, and kind of just moving things around. And I've been doing it long enough that I can kind of understand, like, hey, you need to give this job a little love. This one's okay. This hiring manager has 5 people to review. They don't need any more. Let's give this hiring manager some folks. So, I think that's a non-answer to your question. I
No,
don't know.
there's a lot of good stuff in there. On the subject of giving certain customers or roles more attention. I know you've talked a lot about using creativity to solve problems, and I think the word. I remember actually in a previous life, there was a debate over what we should call hard to fill positions. And it was like difficult to recruit. And it was like, oh, we don't want to hurt the hiring manager's feelings. Let's call it challenge to recruit. And then, the metrics and the KPIs or key performance indicators that gets debated. But to kind of boil that down, there just are positions that are harder to fill. Okay. How do you fill those roles? How do you go at that? Because I'm trying to think of people who are out there listening right now, and they're like, "Oh, this might be my first time actually hearing from a recruiter, where it's not about a job I applied for." Somebody talking about the nuances and all that stuff. So how do you fill these roles? I mean, what does Populus do?
Yeah, a lot of times it's time. A lot of, it's just time. A lot of it. We have tools that we use. We have ways we go out at things. But a lot of it just takes time. There are the easier to fill jobs don't take time, and the harder to fill jobs do.
What's your strategy though for those roles?
Learn the job, get to know the hiring manager, understand the business. We ask a lot of questions about like, hey, tell me about a person who is currently in this role that looks good, or was in this role, or where you can find it. We use the hiring manager's knowledge a lot because they have actually more knowledge than we do, right, about the job they're trying to fill. We know how to go use that knowledge in the marketplace, but they have more knowledge about the actual job. So just asking a lot of, tell me what this person looks like, and then we can build a profile off of that and go find that person in the marketplace. And we do a lot of, we don't blow smoke for hiring managers. We say, man, this is a tough one, right? And then 99% of the time they're like, yeah, it is. That's why you and I are talking. Because if it wasn't a difficult job, they wouldn't need me. Most of the time. So yeah, strategies are get an awesome candidate profile from the hiring managers, use the hiring manager's knowledge and experience and expertise to kind of build a profile, and then go out into the market. And then a lot of times, even if you find the people and they're not interested, asking those people, well, hey, do you know anyone? Where do you guys hang out? Where are you guys, do you have any professional organizations you're a part of that I could tap into? Where did you go to school? Do you have a certain degree? And kind of like pulling the thread on it, like continuing to follow the thread of where to find these folks, right? That's the main thing we do. And then, yeah, like I said, there are just some jobs that are harder to fill. And it's not a bash on the manager or the job. It's just like people have difficult jobs. I remember when we were together at one place, it was, talking to a hiring manager, and I'm like, this sounds really difficult. And he's like, yeah, there's probably about 6 in the US.
Right.
I'm like, right. Oh,
there's demand.
Okay.
And then there's the amount of people for people who can't see.
Yeah. Supply and demand is a thing in the talent world, 1,000%.
It really is.
So yeah. And being honest with the hiring managers or the customers to say, hey, this could take 90 days. It could be a month before you see anyone from me. I'm still working on it, but it could be 3 to 4 weeks before you see a qualified candidate come through.
Right.
Yeah,
I've watched you leverage that to your curiosity and communication as well. I mean, that's so powerful. I mean, even outside of recruiting, just in business, like if, you've been working your tail off on something and you get this tension that they're not seeing the results, right? And you feel this immense pressure to produce results, communicating them to them, about what you're doing. And I feel like that's a way to get unstuck too, very important there.
And a lot of things we used to hear in when we were internal recruiters together was people would say, what do you guys even do?
Right.
What's
your answer to that question?
Well, that's great. And it is, let me not tell you what I do. Let me tell you what I've been doing. Right. I think that that's a huge shift, and that's a good way to keep customers and clients happy in, hey, just so you're aware, here's what we did this week, or here's what I did this week, or, hey, I know you haven't seen a candidate in a while. I'm still working on it. Because the majority of people recruiters talk to aren't fits. It's just a reality. And so the hiring managers or the clients don't ever see those people. And so to you or to the recruiter, you could have talked to 15 people in a week and only sent one person forward. While on the other side of the table, the manager is like, you only talked to one person this week. And so it's on me and on the internal groups and whatever to communicate effectively. Hey, here's the steps we're taking. Here's what we've done. Just so you're aware, I am talking to people, but not all those people are fits. And that's part of why you hired me, is to keep those people away from you. So I think, and that's something that when every place I've been that has asked that question of like, what do you guys even do here? It's like, well, hey, let's just communicate what we've been doing. Let's communicate during the process. Let's communicate on the front end what we will do. At the end of when we hire someone, let's communicate how it went, what steps we took, what worked, what didn't work, that sort of thing. So kind of always be progressing and getting better and stuff like that.
Yeah, you're talking a lot when you're speaking about that. I'm thinking about trust. You're building that trust with the hiring manager. When they say, oh, you only talk to one person, it's like, well, I talked to 15. Then the question goes, well, what was wrong with the 14 that you didn't send me? And then knowing what went wrong, knowing about their licensure required or their years of experience, or they inflated everything on their resume. And when you really got to the meat and potatoes, you found out, oh man, 9 of those 10 years were actually, they were educational or they were part-time or vocational. You never get the full story on a resume. So I think that's really important. When you're thinking about what you're seeing in Kansas City, I mean, what's hot in Kansas City right now as far as, openings that small and medium-sized businesses have open, and then also maybe you can kind of go down, your enthusiasm and your passion for working with, certain types of businesses.
Yes.
Your story to tell, not mine.
Yes. No, I appreciate that. Keep me on track here. So Kansas City, I love Kansas City. I love the Midwest. I think that, you hear kind of the people being rude about like, oh, what's Kansas City? Just fly over middle of the country. And my response is, okay, keep flying because we don't want you, right? We don't want you here. Stay away. But I think Kansas City's had it rough the last couple months, right? And if people follow me on LinkedIn, they've seen me banging the drum about the large businesses in town who have kind of been really disrespectful to their employees, I think is what I'd say. So we have a lot of people in Kansas City who are out of work, right? And people who are good people who have good skills. I think that there's always going to be space and desire for people who are good with people who can learn, people who are willing to try new things. And I think the thing that blows my mind a lot of times is people who don't respond quickly. It's like, if you're looking for a job, answer the phone, man. Answer the phone, answer your email, answer a text, call back, and do it with respect and timing, right? And that's, you hear a lot of, and I feel for folks that are out of work because I've done it, you've done it. With the frustration of like, I've applied to 1,000 things. I've done this. I've had these kind of interviews and, nothing is happening. And it's like, okay, that could be true. But my question to you is, and people say, you need to be a good recruiter. You need to be a good this, you need to be good this, and putting it all in the business. You also need to be a good candidate. You need to be easy to work with. You need to be respectful. You need to be responsive. You need to communicate well. You need to do what they ask of you to an extent, right? Now, if you're a coder and they're saying, "Hey, fix this bug in our system as a test," that's kind of smarmy, right? But you do need to be you need to be a good candidate as well, right? Because that is an indication of what type of an employee you're going to be, right? If you're super difficult, and you can attest to this too, the candidates who have been super difficult to work with, hard to communicate with, who end up getting the job, generally don't work out. It's just you are who you are in the interview. If you're not solid in the interview and hiring process, you're definitely not going to be solid when you get your job, because that's when you should be at your best.
There are exceptions to this, but just to quickly interrupt you to say, when people show you who they are, believe them.
Yeah.
And in the hiring process, I mean, because like to your point, if you don't, like we hear about this, people like they have to do this presentation and they have to do 10 executive interviews and all this stuff. And there comes a point where it's like, okay, when is the prospective employer paying the applicant for their time? There's those types of things. But I mean, everyone is watching and evaluating every step you make throughout the process. And, one of the jokes is your job interview doesn't happen when the hiring manager sits in the room. It happens 2 blocks away from the place. Mm-hmm. When you're driving there, because you could be at a red light next to the hiring manager, and it's being on your best behavior. But, I kind of lost the point of where I was going with that. But, in the process, those red flags, those could disqualify you because we've learned from hiring people that those things will show up in another way.
Yeah. So, well, and the hiring managers are like, man, this person's so hard to get a hold of. Like, they're not really responsive. And then they are in their head and they're like, well, what happens if I hire this person and I need to get a hold of them and they don't respond? And because you are showing them what type of employee you're going to be. So that's, I mean, that's kind of a thing that insider information or something, I don't know. But, I think Kansas City has a lot of opportunities, like I said, for folks who are willing to learn, who are dynamic, who are good with people. If you're good at customer service and you like people and you show up to work on time and work hard, like you could go get a job at a retail store and be the manager of that store in 6 months. I mean, it's right. Really, and I know that those things aren't super glamorous, but it pays the bills, and there's a lot of retail stores are now kind of seeing the value in frontline managers. And so they're increasing pay rates and stuff like that. I mean, I saw a sign, I don't even remember when, but like you could be a store manager at Sonic and make $65,000 a year. You can live on $65K a year in Kansas City. Well, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so I think that's the thing that a lot of folks, they get into their careers and they spend so much time and then they get laid off or they get fired or something happens and they think, well, I can't do anything but this thing I've been doing. Well, no, let's look at, and this is something we do, employment coaching and stuff like that as well, is let's look at what your baseline skill set is and where those skills can transfer, right? And that's the thing that's so frustrating, when companies are in a downturn and they lay off their entire talent acquisition staffs. And I'll go off on this because that's where my passion is. Is recruiters are probably the most dynamic dynamic, customer-focused employees that an organization has, because they are not only researching candidates, they're selling to candidates, they're interviewing candidates, they're building relationships with managers, they know the benefits package, they know the business inside and out. And then just because you don't have to hire someone, you let them all go. Get a clue, right? Get a clue, because you could stick a group of recruiters in a customer success organization and they would kill it. You could put them on the phones as business development reps and they'd kill it. It's just short-sightedness, right? And so I think that's the thing that people need to understand, is just because you've been a recruiter doesn't mean you couldn't be a customer success person, doesn't mean you couldn't be a sales executive, doesn't mean you couldn't be an account executive, doesn't mean you couldn't be a store manager, right? You need to look at the skills you have, distill those down and say, hey, then where can I put those skills? And then build a resume around that, and then use your connections to kind of get your foot in the door. So yeah, and in Kansas City, you're seeing the downturn of big business, right? T-Mobile, Cerner, Yellow Freight, and the uptick of small business, right? The majority of the jobs out there for people in Kansas City, now remote work is completely different, are small businesses, right? And you sent me that thing a couple of weeks ago that was like 95% of small businesses in the U.S. are 5 people or less.
Yeah, that's Small Business Administration.
Yeah, it's
census.gov.
It's wild. It's wild, right? And so to think about that and say, okay, well, what if I want to work for an owner? You know, what if, and that's kind of where I've found my success, or Populus has found its success, is I don't want to work for a Fortune. I don't want to be a name on a vendor list for a Fortune 500. I want to be a partner to a president or an owner or a CEO.
You know, what's awesome about what you're talking about too is clients and prospects that I've met with. A lot of these folks that are owning small businesses in Kansas City, some of them are on the verge of, you know, they want to sell the business or they want to retire, and they're looking for their next, you know, president or CEO. I've had business owners confide in me and say, hey, I've got, you know, another 5 years. I want to train, I want to find, train, raise up the person who can take over this company. So many things happen too in families as well. You know, family changes. People have health scares. People have to retire to take care of family members and things like that. So that's the other, I think, huge advantage of going into smaller businesses is that there's less bureaucracy, there's less red tape, there's less of a focus. I know a lot of companies, it seems like there's like a level of worship for how much education and certifications people have. And, you know, the person's experience and their personality and all their talents are kind of, you know, talked about as an afterthought. But, you know, I wanted to highlight that on small businesses, the benefit of working with small businesses. Even if, you know, you're outside of Kansas City right now, find those small businesses, find those networking groups in your city, you know, to get after this type of information. The other thing that you were talking about was, you know, looking at the skills a person has and being flexible. That's been huge as I've watched the, you know, posts from people and some of the folks that, you know, have been affected in these layoffs. They haven't had to interview for jobs in 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 plus years, some of these folks. And so many things have changed over time. And when you're just looking for your exact job title and you're hoping that all the organizations in your area have that title and then you're coming up blank, I feel like, you know, how do people figure out that, I would describe it as neuroplasticity, right? Like their ability to actually change their mind and maybe go for customer support, right? Or something different. What's your advice, you know, things that you've learned from talking to folks, helping them pivot and be more open-minded? Because that seems to be something I'm trying to do here as well.
I think it's a personal thing. You gotta, you know, even if it's as simple as write down, hey, what am I good at? You know, and then going from there, right? What am I good at? Again, surround yourself with people who know you and care about you. When I was getting ready to do this today, I was thinking about, you know, our leader at a couple places ago used that term board of directors, right? And that term is the people who know you best and they understand what you're saying even if you're not saying it correctly, right? And I think that I have benefited greatly in my personal and professional and now business life by having people in my life who I trust and who I trust understand me and you know what I mean? And I think that that's important for people as they are going through any type of life, whether it is finding a new job, getting laid off, anything. You got to have people in your life who care, trust, and love you, right? And then those people you can sit across the table from and say, hey, what am I good at, man? Like, I know what I've done. I know what my job was, but now I'm in this weird place of, you know, what am I good at, you know? And you and I have had those conversations a lot of like, hey, what do you see? What's going on? What can we do? And kind of the mutually building up of qualities in a person. And so people need that, right? We live in a super isolated world, and it's isolated because you choose it, right? We choose to be isolated. And so that's what I would tell people as they're either looking to start businesses or looking to change jobs, is like, find the people who you trust and dig in with them and ask them, hey, what am I good at? What can I do? I want to start a business. I'm thinking about this. And just kind of, because those people you trust, you're not going to be worried about them, taking your idea or sabotaging you or whatever. It's like, no, they're there to root you on, and I think that's been a huge boost to me, and that's would be a huge boost to anyone.
Absolutely. What's something or some things that you wish you would have known when you got started that you know now? And I know you're under a year old.
Yeah.
There's got to be something.
Yeah. I think the value of trying different things. I think I spent, just in the beginning of the business, I spent too long just thinking I had to do it one way, and being willing to try new things. And then I think as well, not being afraid to ask people's advice who I didn't have a super strong relationship with, or like using customer knowledge, I think, to ask advice. Like I told the story about the flat fee thing. It's like, that was a customer of mine that I did not get a placement for. He picked someone else, but through my relationship building with him, I knew that I could trust his advice from the business side of things. So I was able to say, hey man, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm disappointed you didn't pick my person, but I get it. But I have this thing I'm working on. Like, as a business owner, as a customer, would you buy this thing? And honestly, not being worried about if he would say no, because he did end up saying no. He said, I would not be interested in that, but I think it's a good idea. And I think if I needed the service, that is how I would go to it. Right.
Absolutely.
And so I think that being more willing to kind of put my ideas out there for people who have legitimate ideas to kind of massage and work and give me feedback and stuff. I think that's probably what I wish I would have done sooner. But I think that I had to be at a moment of desperation of like, I just worked for free for 2 months for you.
Right.
Like, you're give me something.
Right. Right.
So yeah, that's probably it. And it's interesting because when I was managing teams of people, I had no problem sharing ideas and let's fail together, let's fail fast, let's do that. And then it's like, when it's your own thing, you hold it a little bit more tightly.
That's right.
So
that's right. Any thought leaders or book writers or books that you've have influenced you as an entrepreneur recently?
I don't read as much as I should, to be honest with you. I just read Never Split the Difference, which I don't remember. You can link it in your show notes.
We'll link it.
Chris Voss, I think, is his name. I think I just pulled. Yeah, I think it's Chris Voss. But Kansas City guy, which is super funny, FBI hostage negotiator. A buddy of mine at my last job actually suggested it to me. It took me 1.5 years to actually read it, but just an awesome book. And I think it's just about the way you can think about business, in that. And he uses this analogy of a married couple, and it's challenging the idea of a win-win, right? It's this married couple. The wife says, I want you to wear the black shoes tonight. The husband says, I want to wear the brown shoes tonight. The win-win solution to that is one black shoe, one brown shoe. It's pretty silly, right? And so that his whole premise is there's no such thing as a win-win, actually. So one person always loses something and one person always has to give up something. So you need to understand at what point is it a win and at what point is it a loss for you, and then where's the spot in between.
I love that.
Yeah, and so it's really cool. I mean, some other books that have been really formative to me is Humble Inquiry, which you gave me when I became a manager. That was just devastatingly baffling, I think, in just the way in which we ask questions is actually we don't actually care what people say 90% of the time. If we're not thinking about it, it's I'm asking you a question to be nice, and I'm thinking about 10 other things. And so how to actually have inquiry that is, hey, actually tell me, and I'm actually listening. That one has been big for me as well. So, and then there's another one that I don't. It's gone. I read it a while ago about this submarine captain. You know what I'm talking about? Is
it Turn the Ship Around?
That's the one. Yes. So that one's wild as well. That's more about empowering your employees to think for themselves, not being the only person who has the keys to the boat, and
right.
So yeah, those are probably the ones. And I don't read a ton. Probably should read more, but
no, I think all three of those. I've got Never Split the Difference on my list, and notice there's somebody in. Here's the other thing about Kansas City is there's always some sort of seminar or some sort of workshop or some networking event, and I think there's somebody who is actually talking about that book, and it's not the author, because I know the author spoke at an event a couple years back, but yeah, I mean, great reading recommendations there. I think. That's so important, when you do read to pick something that meets you where you're at that time. I guess kind of just in closing, is there anything that we didn't talk about today that, you'd like to discuss or tell the audience about?
No, I mean, I think that the main thing that I've always strived to do is empower people to make their own decisions, right? And kind of it's your career. It's your, it's your business if you decide to start one. You don't owe anybody anything when it comes to staying somewhere, when it comes to starting a business. And that's the thing that I'd really dislike when companies say we're like a family, because I think it's kind of manipulative, right? Because you're not a family. You're a business. You're there to work. And I think that when you say we're like a family, you get stuck in this I can't leave my family. I can't leave my family to go start a business, or I can't leave my family to go get a different job or a raise or whatever. And it's you can be friends with people. You can care for people. You can treat people with respect inside your business. And you can even, build lifelong relationships. You and I we met each other at work, right? We're still not family. You know what I mean? But I think that's what I would tell folks is, just understand that you can try things. It's okay to try things. It's okay to fail. It's okay to leave a business and go out on a limb and try something different. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. At least you tried, right? And you can hold that stuff loosely, and experience a lot more growth and happiness and fullness, and a lot more difficulty, in starting your own thing or moving, but at least you tried.
Absolutely.
That's what I would say. Yeah.
Love that. So good to have you on the show today, Joey. How can people find you? I mean, we'll post some things, but how do you prefer to engage?
Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn probably 8 hours a day, which makes me want to throw up a little bit that I'm doing, but that's the world. So Populus Recruiting on LinkedIn, or my name, Joey Williams, on LinkedIn, populusrecruiting.com. And then, I have an Instagram page. I don't ever use it, but it's just Populus Recruiting. So I would say LinkedIn is probably the best way to reach me, or my website.
Absolutely. All right, Joey, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem, brother.
Thank you so much for listening to the KCBC podcast. This is your host, Michael Reisinger. Hope that this conversation was beneficial to you today. Again, remember to follow, click the little bell button to be notified when we have new episodes. And if you'd kindly leave us a review, we'd really appreciate it. Thanks again.